On this Sunday night, Israel's coalition government divided. The country's leaders clash over Biden's Gaza peace plan proposal.
There are many more open questions.
What it means for the efforts to secure a ceasefire. Could a rate cut help the housing crunch?
To create conditions that would allow rates to come down.
What to expect from this week's interest rate announcement and whether Canadian home buyers could finally catch a break. The privacy concerns sparked with the rise of e-commerce app Temu overshadowing TikTok. The desperate efforts to reverse coral bleaching, its devastating impact, and the conservation efforts.
Global National with Farah Nasser. Reporting tonight, Neetu Garcha.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Efforts to bring some kind of peace in Gaza and Israel are hitting more roadblocks tonight, this time from within the Israeli government. On Friday, Israel proposed a peace plan that's been backed by the U.S. It requires some negotiating with Hamas in an effort to bring stability to Gaza. But two of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's most influential ministers are having none of it, saying there can be no end to the war unless Hamas is completely obliterated. Redmond Shannon reports on how those divisions are splitting apart the government and risking to derail the latest peace effort.
Nearly 8 months of a military campaign against Hamas has done little to unite Israel. A nation that was already divided on politics is also split on how to end this war.
It's a roadmap to an enduring ceasefire and the release of all hostages.
Friday's three-phase peace plan announced by U.S. President Joe Biden is essentially an Israeli proposal, but even Israel's government can't agree on it. National Security Minister Ben-Gvir says it's a reckless deal, insisting that there should be no peace before Hamas is destroyed. He and fellow far-right cabinet member Bezalel Smotrich are both threatening to withdraw their party's support for the coalition government. The first stage of the deal would see a 6-week truce while some Israeli hostages are released, along with a partial Israeli withdrawal from Gaza.
There are many more, I would say, open questions rather than answers regarding particularly the second phase and onwards vis-a-vis what will be the future solution in Gaza Strip.
Nonetheless, main opposition leader Yair Lapid says his party would step in, at least for now, to support the plan if Ben-Gvir and Smotrich do not. Hamas has provisionally welcomed the plan, but it has not yet given a formal response. On Sunday, Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said he is preparing a ruling alternative to Hamas in Gaza, a statement that is hardly likely to encourage Hamas to agree to the deal.
It makes much more sense to be very skeptic regarding the feasibility and the odds of success of such a deal.
This peace proposal comes just 2 weeks after War Cabinet member Benny Gantz also threatened to leave the government unless Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu made a post-war plan. This may be that plan, but whether it succeeds is another question. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
As Redmond mentioned, two of the most influential members of Netanyahu's cabinet are threatening to break up his government if it makes any deals with Hamas. The National Security Minister, Ben-Gvir, has long been a fierce critic of any Palestinian claims to statehood. Ben-Gvir is himself a settler in the Israeli-occupied West Bank. Similarly, Netanyahu's finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, has also been enthusiastic about expanding illegal Israeli settlements in the Palestinian territory. The opposition leader, Yair Lapid, however, leads a more centrist party. He's agreeing to prop up the Netanyahu government if it proceeds with the U.S.-backed ceasefire deal. Canadians feeling the pressure of inflation could be in for some good news soon. There is a lot of pressure on the Bank of Canada to cut interest rates. The financial markets are banking on an 80% chance that it will happen this week. But as David Baxter reports, a rate cut won't be enough to bring down Canada's sky-high housing prices.
Quite a good-sized bedroom.
People looking to buy a home face two major barriers: high listing prices in many cities across Canada and interest rates at a 20-year high. It's a daunting prospect for those looking to enter the market.
It's unrealistic it will happen within 5 years without an incredibly high interest rate for a mortgage and the sizable down payment you have to make. So it's really about paying off the debt we've accumulated kind of coming up through our teens into our early 20s before then being able to apply for the mortgage to then make a down payment on a home.
With 4 months of the inflation rate being within the central bank's target range and the economy underperforming expectations, there's a chance Wednesday could result in the first key interest rate cut since the outset of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Interest rates are at a contractionary level now. We recognize that that is really creating a lot of hardship for many people in Canada, which is why we've been working so hard to create conditions that would allow rates to come down.
Inflation took off back in 2021, hitting its peak of 8% in June 2022. Now, 2 years later, high interest rates have helped rein it in by slowing big-ticket spending. But with the average cost of a home in Canada sitting at more than $700,000, lower interest rates are just part of the affordability equation.
It's a box that's hard to escape from. We've had fairly stagnant wages in Canada for the last number of years, maybe a full decade. And how is it ever going to catch up to that massive jump in prices that occurred since 2021?
A key part of the government's plan to help more young people buy property, the First Home Savings Account. This was launched in 2022, and as of the end of last year, there are almost 625,000 active accounts. But the average deposit level, a little under just $3,800. Neetu?
David Baxter in Ottawa. Thanks for that, David. One of the factors keeping inflation and interest rates high is the cost of gas. And today, OPEC, the global cartel which sets oil production levels, took action that would keep those prices high. Saudi Arabia and its oil-producing allies, including Russia, agreed to extend deep output cuts into 2025. Oil prices have been trading near $80 per barrel. Keeping prices high helps the Saudis diversify their economy away from oil, but it also supports Russia in its war against Ukraine. In Quebec, 8 people, including 4 children, have suffered second and third-degree burns from a house fire near Montreal. Emergency crews were dispatched to a home in Saint-Constant after 10 p.m. last night over reports of a fire and a possible explosion. First responders found the wounded on the ground gathered near a bonfire. They're all expected to recover from their injuries. Fire officials say the blaze happened inside a garage. The cause is being investigated, but propane canisters and a propane-fueled vehicle were found inside. It's been just over 3 months since Ottawa reinstated a visa requirement for Mexican nationals coming to Canada. Since then, the federal government has been working to clear a massive backlog of asylum claims from Mexico over the last 5 years. But as Mackenzie Gray explains, it will likely cost taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars. Mackenzie?
Well, Neetu, the cost to clear just a small portion of the ballooning backlog of asylum claims is estimated by the Parliamentary Budget Officer to run at nearly $500 million. The PBO analyzed refugee claims from people who came to Canada on electronic travel authorization, or ETAs, an easy-to-get document that citizens of certain countries can get online for $7. The office estimates it will cost on average roughly $16,500 per claimant to clear the backlog that is primarily made of Mexican nationals claiming asylum, who could come to Canada visa-free from 2016 until early 2024.
What we found with the Mexican claimants for a good chunk of them is that they were indeed not entitled to it, and that is a charge on the system that arguably we shouldn't have had to assume in the first place.
The projected cost, $455 million, but clearing the entire asylum backlog is likely to cost billions more. The PBO only reviewed the ETA stream, which accounts for just 17% of asylum claims over the last 5 years, and is part of a system that is bursting at the seams. The Immigration and Refugee Board, the body that adjudicates claims, has reported a 75% application increase during the first 4 months of 2024 compared to the previous year.
I'm massively concerned about this. I'm eager to read something from the Immigration and Refugee Board about how they plan on absorbing this jump.
While the Liberals pledged nearly $750 million to deal with the backlog, it could have been smaller if Mexicans had not been allowed to travel to Canada without a visa, according to the former immigration minister.
Lifting visa requirements where I know the professional advice in the department was against it. The criteria we had set as a country for lifting visa requirements were against it. We did it anyway.
While asylum claims continue to reach records, the Immigration and Refugee Board can't keep up with processing them, Neethu, with the backlog having more than doubled from April 2023, now sitting at nearly 200,000 asylum seekers.
All right, that's Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa tonight. Thanks for that, Mackenzie. Mexico is also on the verge of history. Coming up, what you should know about an election that will likely produce the country's first female president. Plus, the terrifying scenes in Istanbul after an apartment collapse reignites concerns over post-earthquake building safety. One person is dead and 8 others are injured in Istanbul, where a building suddenly collapsed this morning. The dramatic video captured from this street camera shows the collapse, narrowly missing a bus and several people waiting to board it. Rescuers scrambled to pull victims out from under the rubble. At least one man was pulled out alive. The accident renewing concerns about the quality of Istanbul's buildings just over a year after devastating earthquakes left several buildings in ruins and killed more than 53,000 people. Iran's hardline former president Mahmoud Ahmadinejad is planning to run in the country's presidential election scheduled for June 28th. Ahmadinejad is seeking to regain the country's top political position after a helicopter crash killed the nation's president Ibrahim Raisi last month. Ahmadinejad was first elected president in 2005. He served 2 four-year terms in which he clashed with the West over Iran's nuclear ambitions and sparked massive Green Movement protests calling for his removal from office. But Ahmadinejad's attempt to run in 2021 was barred by authorities, and there's a chance of that happening again. Voters across Mexico are casting ballots in an election first. Regardless of the outcome of the vote, what is certain is that a female leader will, for the first time, run the world's biggest Spanish-speaking country. As Mike Armstrong reports, it's a choice between the hand-picked protege of the existing president and another woman who's billing herself as a radical change-maker.
If he were on the ballot, Mexico's current president would likely win. The approval ratings of Andrés Manuel López Obrador are still solid at about 65%, but a Mexican president can only serve one 6-year term. So when Obrador cast his ballot Sunday morning, it was likely for the party he created and the candidate he handpicked.
Viva Claudia Sheinbaum!
Now, that candidate is a 61-year-old former climate scientist. Claudia Sheinbaum studied energy engineering in Mexico and the U.S. In 2000, Obrador was the mayor of Mexico City and pulled Sheinbaum into politics. He wanted a scientist with progressive values and made her his environmental chief. Sheinbaum herself was elected the city's mayor in 2018. She resigned last summer to run for president. Her focus from the beginning has been to push herself as the continuity candidate. She wrapped up the campaign with a pledge, she said, to uphold her predecessor's legacy. Well, for voters, there are 2 sides to that legacy. Under Obrador and his Morena party, the economy grew, minimum wage went up, and social welfare spending tripled. That's helped Sheinbaum in the polls, but it's also left Mexico with its biggest budget deficit in decades. Obrador also struggled to control corruption and gang violence. The country has about 30,000 murders a year. It has affected this election. More than 3 dozen candidates for local positions have been killed by gangs. Now, if Sheinbaum wins, as pollsters are predicting, Mexico will get its first female president at a time when violence against women is growing, as is crime in general. There are estimates that in 95% of crimes in the country, no one is ever prosecuted. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
Trump and TikTok ahead. The now convicted former president tries to take advantage of the very app that he tried to get rid of. Former U.S. President and now convicted felon Donald Trump has debuted on TikTok, despite once seeking to ban the popular social media platform.
The president is now on TikTok. It's my honor.
Trump launching his new account just days after being found guilty on all 34 counts in his historic hush money trial. During his presidency, Trump signed an executive order to ban the China-based app from the U.S. That order was blocked in court. The Biden administration also views TikTok as a national security threat over concerns around potential Chinese spying. In April, Biden signed a bill that would allow the U.S. to ban the platform if its Beijing-based parent company does not sell it within 9 months. E-commerce app Temu is giving Amazon a real run for its money. And according to privacy and cybersecurity experts, it's giving existing laws the runaround. Ann Gaviola has more on why many are gravely concerned about Temu's rapid rise.
U.S. lawmakers are targeting TikTok, citing security and privacy concerns TikTok disputes. But experts say they should be paying more attention to e-commerce apps like Temu, whose rapid rise in popularity, very low prices, and ties to China are causing a stir. Temu and Shein were recently parodied on Saturday Night Live as a fictional company called Shimu.
Dress, $10. Shoes, $5. How so cheap? Don't worry about it.
Temu was the world's most popular marketplace app last year, with nearly 340 million downloads. Amazon, a distant second. But it faces multiple proposed class action lawsuits alleging privacy overreaches. Temu tells Global News it categorically denies the allegations in these lawsuits and intends to vigorously defend against them. The company says it is transparent about its data practices. But like other e-commerce apps, it does work with third-party service providers and ensures they only have access to personal information needed to perform their functions and services. Canada has the PIPEDA Act, governing how the private sector collects personal information. But Ontario's former privacy commissioner warns things may be slipping through this decades-old law.
It's 20 years old. I mean, this is how dated it is. We don't have sufficient laws in place.
The Office of the Federal Privacy Commissioner tells Global News it is aware of some concerns related to Temu, but is not conducting any investigations. In a statement to Global News, the Innovation Minister's office cited Bill C-27, tabled in 2022, which, as the Consumer Privacy Protection Act, is designed to replace PIPEDA. Bill C-27 is currently being studied. Still, questions abound about Temu and its business model. 2023 analysis by U.S. firm Grizzly Research claims Temu loses money on most of its e-commerce transactions. Not shocking when items are offered incredibly cheaply on the app that in its Super Bowl ad invites you to shop like a billionaire.
And what do you get in return? You know, you have to ask that. People aren't just giving things away.
PDD Holdings doesn't disclose financial information specific to Temu, but a company spokesperson says external estimates of Temu's losses are far from reality. It says Temu is able to offer such cheap prices because of its efficient supply chain that cuts costs. U.S. lawmakers issued a recent report saying there is an extremely high risk that Temu's supply chains are contaminated with forced labor. This year's federal budget said legislation would be introduced in 2024 to eradicate forced labor from Canadian supply chains. Temu tells Global News it strictly prohibits all forms of involuntary labor, and allegations to the contrary are completely ungrounded.
Until robust rules to protect consumers are in place, experts say the best line of defense is to do research before downloading apps. Neethu?
All right, Ann Gaviola for us tonight. Thanks for that, Ann. Next, an urgent call to action as record temperatures trigger a mass coral bleaching. This tiny island off Panama's Caribbean coast, home to about 1,300 people, will soon be completely uninhabitable forever. The indigenous Guna people are now the first of 63 communities along Panama's coast who scientists believe will be forced to relocate due to rising sea levels in the coming decades. The Panamanian government has built 300 new houses for Guna families. They're expected to move into them next week. It's not difficult to feel overwhelmed, hopeless, even anxious by all the dire news about the fate of our planet as climate change wreaks havoc on weather events around the world. Experts say our rapidly heating planet is also having a dramatic impact on coral, including in Australia's Great Barrier Reef. Awareness is growing on the role of warming ocean temperatures and the resulting impact on these marine ecosystems. Jackson Prosco reports on the very real implications of unhealthy coral.
Once vibrant and teeming with life, Thailand's coral reefs are now a desolate wasteland. It's never been this bleached before, all very white this year, says this local fisherman. Global warming has caused a slow boil of the world's oceans. The unusually warm water has stressed reefs beyond the limits of survival in the eastern Gulf of Thailand. I couldn't find a single healthy coral, says this marine biologist. The U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration has warned of a fourth worldwide bleaching event, threatening fish and other marine life which depend on reefs, and in turn the humans who depend on fish.
If we have a large-scale degradation of coral reefs continue, like what we're seeing now, this quite literally threatens 25% of every living thing in the world's oceans.
62 countries have now reported bleaching events in the last year and a half, impacting nearly 2/3 of the world's reefs. Last year, Florida experienced the largest bleaching event in its history. This year, water temperatures are already hotter than normal, even earlier in the year.
It's warmer than it usually is on average right now. We'll see what the later summer brings and how many weeks it'll actually stay hot.
Fearing another mass die-off, conservationists have been planning for the worst-case scenario for months as they work to protect the nurseries they use to grow and preserve corals.
The big thing that we're considering is prepping to potentially evacuate corals if we have to.
The impact on the world's oceans is already unprecedented. It's now a question of how much worse it will get. Jackson Prosco, Global News, Washington.
And that is Global National for this Sunday night. I'm Neetu Garcha. Tonight's Your Canada is this train passing through St. Adolphe, Manitoba. We love seeing your Canada. Please keep emailing your photos to viewers@globalnational.com. Thanks so much for watching. Farah Nasser will be back at the anchor desk tomorrow. Have a great night.